Keanu Reeves sees a struggling guard. His next move surprises everyone. Every night, dressed in his dark blue uniform, Jake Thompson stood silently in front of a towering government building. He was a security guard, a former soldier who had left the battlefield but still carried the discipline and responsibility of a man trained for duty. As influential figures passed by, he remained invisible, a shadow in the background, unnoticed and unacknowledged. Until one night, Keanu Reeves appeared. Their initial encounter was nothing more than a polite nod. But what happened next would alter Jake's fate in ways he could never have imagined. A challenge he wasn't expecting, a fleeting opportunity, a single decision that could pull him out of obscurity or push him deeper into the abyss of insignificance. What did Keanu see in Jake, and what happened that surprised everyone? The night shift was always the longest for Jake Thompson. He started his shift at 9 o'clock in the evening and didn't leave until the sun rose. The cold, endless hallways, the sound of his own footsteps echoing through the silence, the heavy locked doors sealing away the rooms where critical decisions were made, all of it defined his nights. Every evening, he patrolled every inch of the vast government building, ensuring its security. But he was just a guard, an unnamed protector in a place filled with people whose names shaped history. Jake had once been a soldier. He had served in the military for 8 years, surviving grueling deployments in the Middle East. But when he returned home, the world no longer looked the same. Soldiers like him, once hailed as heroes, had become mere footnotes in society, acknowledged in speeches but forgotten in reality. He had no real job prospects, no opportunities to put his hard-earned skills to use. He had tried to move up in the security field, but no one was willing to give him a chance. His job allowed him to pay the bills, but it offered him no future. Every night he stood guard at the imposing gates, watching powerful individuals walk past him, stepping into meetings that he would never be part of. Each time he saluted a politician or a wealthy executive, a thought lingered in his mind. If my life had taken a slightly different turn, could I have been one of them? But then, like every other night, Jake lowered his head, stayed in position, and carried on with his duty. He had no idea that in just a few hours his life would take an unexpected turn. As the clock struck midnight, a convoy of sleek black vehicles rolled slowly into the building's courtyard. Headlights swept across the pavement, reflecting off the towering glass windows. Jake didn't need to look twice. He knew exactly who was arriving. Keanu Reeves had been here before, but he had never once acknowledged Jake's presence. Until now, Keanu stepped out of the car. This time, he didn't just walk past like everyone else. He stopped and looked Jake straight in the eye. Jake stood at attention, his gaze steady as the convoy pulled up to the front entrance. The car door swung open, and within seconds, a team of security personnel spread out, forming a protective perimeter. Then Keanu stepped out, dressed in a sharp black suit. His presence commanded attention. Confidence radiated from him. Jake had seen that look before, poised, self-assured, but tonight something felt different. Jake remained in position, just as he always did when high-profile figures passed by. But as Keanu approached the entrance, he suddenly stopped and turned toward him. "How's your night going, officer?" Keanu's voice was calm, steady. Jake hesitated for a fraction of a second. In all his years working here, no one of Keanu's stature had ever asked him that. Every day, influential people walked past him, but he had never been a part of their world. Yet, here was Keanu Reeves noticing him. Keanu Reeves quickly composed himself. "All good, sir." Keanu nodded, but he didn't move on. Instead, he studied Jake for a long moment. His gaze wasn't the detached glance of someone simply acknowledging protocol. It was analytical, as though he saw something in Jake that even Jake himself hadn't recognized. "You served in the military, didn't you?" Keanu asked. Jake was caught off guard. There were no visible signs indicating his past. No medals, no insignia, just his posture, his squared shoulders, the way he carried himself. That must have been what Keanu noticed. "Yes, sir, 8 years in the Army." Keanu nodded slowly as if confirming a suspicion. 8 years, that's a long time. And now you're here. Something about the question tightened in Jake's chest. Keanu wasn't belittling him, but it was hard to admit out loud that, after everything he'd been through, he was now just a security guard. "It wasn't easy. I handle security for this building, sir," Jake replied. Keanu kept his sharp gaze on Jake, then let out a small smile, not condescending, but as if he'd just discovered something interesting. "Tell me, do you think this building is truly secure?" Jake blinked. Was this a test? This wasn't the kind of question people normally asked him. "I believe we do our best to keep it safe, sir." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Doing your best doesn't always mean it's enough. If you had the power to change the security system here, what would you do differently?" Jake fell silent. It wasn't an easy question. He had countless ideas about how the security system could be improved, the weak spots he'd noticed, the vulnerabilities no one had addressed. But who was he to suggest changes? Yet at this moment, the man standing before him wasn't just powerful, he was someone who was actually listening. "There are a few areas I believe could be improved, sir," Jake admitted. Keanu nodded, an intrigued look in his eyes. "Good, I'll be back soon. When I am, I want to hear your thoughts." Jake could hardly believe his ears. Did Keanu just say what he thought he did? Did he actually want to hear the opinion of a regular security guard? Before Jake could process what had happened, Keanu stepped inside the building, leaving him standing there with a storm of questions racing through his mind. Was that just small talk, or was he serious? For the first time in years, Jake felt like he wasn't invisible, and he knew this might be his one and only chance to prove himself. Jake couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. The words echoed in his mind for days. Was this really an opportunity, or just a passing remark? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. If he wasn't ready when the moment came, he might lose the only chance of his life. Every night after his shift, Jake stayed late. He quietly studied the building's security protocols, taking notes on weaknesses he had observed over time, blind spots in surveillance cameras, checkpoints that weren't as secure as they should be, access routes that could be exploited. He also dove into research on modern security technologies, brushing up on the latest advancements in threat detection, things he had once been trained in during his military service, but had never been able to apply. 3 weeks passed, then one evening, Keanu returned to the building. As he walked past Jake, he stopped just like before. "I told you to prepare some ideas, didn't I?" Jake took a deep breath, feeling the tension tighten in his chest. "Yes, sir." "Good, let's hear it." Jake was ready. He laid out the security vulnerabilities he'd observed, weak spots that could be exploited, blind spots in surveillance coverage, in areas where security measures weren't as effective as they should be. He explained the improvements he believed could make the building safer. His voice was steady, each word chosen carefully. He knew he wouldn't get a second chance. Keanu listened in silence. Behind him, a few security personnel exchanged glances. No one had expected a regular guard to deliver such sharp, well-thought-out analysis. When Jake finished, Keanu nodded slowly. "I like the way you think." Before Jake could react, Keanu turned to one of his aides. "Set up a meeting. I want to see what he's capable of." Jake couldn't believe what he'd just heard. A meeting? What did that even mean? But there was no time to process it, because that very night something happened that threw him into a situation he never anticipated. At exactly 2 a.m., as the building lay in silence, the alarm system suddenly blared to life. On the security monitors, red lights flashed in sync. Unauthorized access detected. Security personnel rushed to the control room. On the screens, a shadowy figure moved through a restricted area. No one knew how he had gotten in. The doors remained locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. One of the senior officers spoke up. "Might be a system glitch." But Jake didn't buy it. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, a sinking feeling creeping into his gut. He recognized the location where the intruder stood, one of the weak points he had identified in his report. Without hesitation, Jake grabbed the radio. "We have an intruder. I need a team to move toward the southwest corridor immediately." The others hesitated, unsure of the situation. Then a firm voice broke through. "Do as he says." Jake turned to see Keanu Reeves standing in the doorway of the control room, his expression serious and unwavering. No one questioned the order after that. Within seconds, a tactical team moved toward the location Jake had pinpointed. When they arrived, everything appeared normal at first, until one of the agents noticed something unusual beneath a floor panel. It was a small device, a data interception tool, clearly unauthorized. Jake held his breath. Someone had attempted to breach the building's security system. If it hadn't been caught in time, the consequences could have been devastating. Keanu slowly turned to Jake, his voice steady. "You see, I told you doing your best isn't always enough." Jake's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He had just proven his abilities, not through theories, but through real action. Keanu studied him for a moment longer, then spoke words that Jake would never forget. "Tomorrow you're no longer a security guard. I have a new job for you." Jake was speechless. Tonight his life had changed forever. Jake sat alone in a small office tucked away in the corner of the building, staring at the paper in front of him. It was an official notice from Keanu's office, a temporary assignment as a security advisor. But along with it came a daunting challenge. Within 1 week, Jake had to submit a comprehensive report analyzing the building's entire security system. Every vulnerability, every weak spot, every solution to improve its defenses. He also needed to provide a realistic plan for execution. Jake didn't know whether to feel honored or overwhelmed. 1 week? A team of experts would need a month to complete such a task. But he wasn't an expert. He was just a security guard, the guy who had been standing outside the door. Part of him wanted to quit before he even began. But then he remembered the way Keanu had looked at him and said, "I have a new job for you." That wasn't an empty promise, it was a real opportunity. And if he let it slip away, he might never get another one. Jake stayed up late every night. He pored over building schematics, studied access control systems, and analyzed every surveillance camera's blind spots. He reviewed old security reports, searching for overlooked flaws. But no matter how hard he worked, he felt stuck. This wasn't the military, where everything followed a strict protocol. This was a far more complex system, one involving technology, politics, and unpredictable threats. By the fourth night, frustration had set in. Sitting alone in his office, he stared at the messy notes scattered across his desk. A wave of doubt washed over him. "I don't have a cybersecurity degree. I've never been an advisor at this level. What am I even doing here?" Just then the door swung open. Keanu walked in alone without his security detail. He glanced at the papers on Jake's desk before pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "How far have you gotten?" Jake exhaled, pushing a few documents toward him. "I've identified some weak points, but putting together a foolproof plan, I'm not sure I can do it, sir." Keanu studied him for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Do you know what separates a leader from everyone else?" Jake remained silent. "They don't need to have all the answers," Keanu continued. "They just need to know how to find them." Jake frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Keanu gestured to the papers scattered on Jake's desk. "You had a team in the military, didn't you? When you were out on the battlefield, did you do everything alone?" A realization hit Jake. He wasn't supposed to figure this out on his own. He could seek help. Keanu stood up, giving Jake a firm pat on the shoulder before heading for the door. "I didn't pick you because you have all the answers. I picked you because you know how to find them. 1 week is enough if you learn how to work smart." Jake sat there for a few moments after Keanu left. For the first time, the weight on his shoulders didn't feel quite as heavy. This challenge wasn't about proving he knew everything. It was about proving he could lead. Later that night, Jake stood in front of the towering government building, the icy wind cutting through his uniform. A mix of anticipation and pride swirled inside him. He had just completed a full security report, something he never thought he'd have the chance to write. But was it good enough? Would Keanu actually implement his recommendations? He wouldn't have time to find out. At 1:47 a.m., the piercing sound of an alarm shattered the silence. Red warning lights flashed across the security control room. Chaos erupted as night shift officers scrambled to check surveillance feeds. A frantic voice crackled through the radio. "We have an unauthorized breach. West basement sector. Motion sensors just picked up movement." Jake sprinted into the control room, his eyes locking onto the security monitors. A shadow moved swiftly through a blind spot in the corridor. No broken locks, no shattered windows, yet someone had made it inside. A nearby security officer spoke up. "Could be a system glitch. We've had false alarms before." Jake didn't believe in coincidences. In his security report, he had flagged a specific vulnerability in the West Basement sector, an area staff rarely considered a risk. But what if someone else had discovered the same weakness before they had a chance to fix it? His grip tightened around the radio. I need a team to check the area immediately. No one moves without direct orders. The other officers exchanged uncertain glances. Then a firm voice cut through the tension from behind. Do as he says. Jake turned around. Keanu Reeves stood at the doorway, his gaze cold and sharp. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't even surprised. He had the calm demeanor of a man who had seen far too many situations like this before. A tactical team quickly mobilized. Their footsteps echoed through the corridors as they moved toward the basement. Jake followed, his hand instinctively resting on the gun at his hip. For the first time since leaving the military, he felt the adrenaline surge through his veins. They arrived at the flag sector. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows along the walls. No sign of an intruder. The place was dead silent. One of the officers checked the entrance doors. No forced entry, everything still locked. Jake wasn't convinced. He crouched down, inspecting the ground closely. A single footprint in the dust, fresh. He signaled for the team to spread out, scanning every inch of the area. Then a voice rang out from the far side of the room. Over here, we've got something. They had found it. A small device discreetly attached to an electrical panel near the building's main server system. Jake's heart pounded. This wasn't just a break-in. Someone had planted this to extract data, or worse, to take control of the entire security network. Another officer stammered, "How did they get in without being detected?" Jake closed his eyes for a brief moment. The answer was painfully clear. They had exploited the very security gap he had flagged in his report. If he hadn't caught it in time, the building's entire security system could have been compromised right under their noses. Keanu stepped forward, picking up the small device. He turned it over in his hands, examining it carefully before looking up at Jake. "Looks like you were right." Jake wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a test anymore. This was real. Keanu handed the device to a security officer, his expression sharper than ever. Keanu Reeves' voice was calm but unyielding. "I want to know who did this, and I want to know now." Jake clenched his fists, determination coursing through him. He had worked so hard to prove himself worthy of this opportunity, but now it wasn't just about proving himself anymore. This was a real challenge, one he couldn't afford to fail. He had started this journey as an invisible security guard, a former soldier standing quietly outside the gates of influence. But in just a short time, through courage, determination, and sharp instincts, he had shown that he was meant for something more. Jake didn't need a lofty title or a high-ranking position to prove his worth. All he needed was a chance, and when that chance came, he didn't back down. How many people are just like Jake, talented, hardworking, yet never truly recognized? How many dreams are abandoned simply because no one takes the time to listen? Jake's story isn't just about one man. It's a reminder that each of us may face a defining moment, a moment when courage and action can change our lives forever. And maybe the next person isn't Jake. Maybe it's you. If this story inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed your life? Or are you still waiting for your chance to prove yourself? Don't forget to like this video if you found it meaningful, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more powerful stories like this. Thanks for being here with us. And remember, when opportunity knocks, don't hesitate to open the door.